Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Dreamforce Day number 3. My name is Mahesh Sabnani. I'm with the ISV and App Exchange team. Welcome you to Dreamforce today, and I'm going to now let my co-presenters introduce themselves.
Hey, good morning. My name is Itzik Koren. I'm a product manager here at Salesforce, and I'm responsible for our authentication services. That includes things like UI login, API login, single sign-on, and many other security controls that we have around the login process.
Thank you very much. And I'm Michael Holt. I am an ISV technical evangelist based out of the UK. So I'm sure this isn't the first time you've seen the forward-looking statement slide. Please make any of your purchasing decisions based on what's currently available. So a quick agenda for today. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges all of us in the room often face with regard to identity, present you with some use cases and some patterns, and then we're going to have a demo from Mahesh on one of the patterns and a demo from Itzik on the other. We'll provide you with some resources, and then if you can hold all of your questions, we'll take those at the end of the session. Just so you're all aware, we're going to provide you with 2 particular solutions today. These aren't the only solutions to the problems that we're going to describe, but there are a couple of examples for you to take away with you. So before we get started, show of hands in the room, how many people log into multiple orgs or have access to multiple orgs? Yeah, so pretty much everybody in the room. And those of you who don't, hopefully the problem will be made very clear by the end of this slide. So I want to have you picture a company. That company is making use of Salesforce. And that particular company has a number of lines of business. Here we've got HR, finance, and IT. And over time, those particular lines of business adopt a Salesforce org for themselves. It's quite a common pattern we see and a perfectly acceptable approach. But what ultimately ends up happening is you have users who need access to multiple different orgs. And when they return to log into those orgs, they need to remember their credentials, and that's not always that easy for us as humans. Second scenario I want to present to you is we have an individual who wants to sign up and get access to a service. And when they do that, they have a number of different ways to sign up for that service to make the process easier for sign up. That's usually pretty fluid, but the problem is when they return to use that service, they can't always remember which one they chose to sign up with. So we've got a couple of solutions we're going to provide to you today. The first of which is the HubSpoke model, and the second is the interview-based login. So first of all, let's go through the HubSpoke model. There's a few use cases here that we see quite regularly, the first of which is in the financial space, where fund managers need access to prospectuses to review certain details of those prospectuses, and to do that, they need access to various different orgs. In the energy sector, we see companies providing their own energy solutions, and individual contractors need access to those solutions in various different orgs. This is actually going to be the focus point of Mahesh's demo later on. And then lastly, in the medical sector, where private doctors and nurses work at multiple different hospitals, those hospitals have various different Salesforce orgs, and the doctors and nurses need to log in order to update and review patient notes. So all of these scenarios we see quite regularly, and in each one, the scenario is far easier for the users if they have to remember just one set of credentials. So the approach we're going to take to solve that is the HubSpoke pattern, as I mentioned previously. So we have our contractors, and those contractors are going to log in to a central identity-providing hub org, which has a self-signed certificate within Salesforce combined with a connected app. From there, that central IDP is going to provide login access to our subscriber or spoke orgs that we see here on the right-hand side. So just so that's clear, the users are going to use one single set of credentials to access the identity-providing hub org in order to get through and be provisioned with access to the subscriber orgs, just using that one set of credentials. Moving on to the interview-based login. The scenario that we often see, I'm sure many of you are pretty familiar with a screen such as this one, where we have no less than 11 different options to sign up for a single service. That's great because it means we can be pretty flexible in what we use to sign up for that service, but ultimately when we return to it, if we haven't been there in a week, we've forgotten what we used, especially if we've got Twitter, Facebook, etc. We've got all of them these days. That went on too far. So the approach we're going to use to solve this one is called login discovery. There is a login discovery Apex handler that Itzik is going to take you through. Developers can customize this in order to invoke the appropriate authentication flow and grant users access to that Salesforce instance. So I'm going to hand over to Mahesh to run through the demo for the HubSpoke model.
Okay, thanks, Michael. This was a great overview. With the hub and spoke pattern, I'm going to kind of use a use case. This is a company that's trying to operate as a contract services organization in the oil and gas industry. This is an ISV that we're working with. And this is a common single sign-on scenario model. So although it's somewhat fictitious for the purpose of the demo, it's based on a real life scenario. So let's get into it. So a little bit of the background on the company. So we're calling the company GenCom Petro. They're a company in the oil and gas industry, and what they do is all about operationalizing old school pen and paper processes. So when you go to an oil rig, everything is pen and paper, not very high tech. So they have developed a solution where you can pretty much get access to all your work, your cases, whatever you have to do. So contractors typically come on site expecting pen and paper. They now show up and they have to access the system and they have to get to their cases and start their work. The challenge is that there's so many of these workers that they needed a mechanism where they can log in with one set of credentials, and you had a login-based model that could scale very large. So we're going to talk about how using communities to do that. Contractors arrive at the drilling rig, and they basically log into the org, and then they're also provisioned in the org. So what you have is the assumption here that when they arrive on site and they're accessing a GenCom solution on site, they want to be able to get to that solution without having to go through a complicated process of login and registration. So single sign-on in this case is going to do the provisioning and the registration into the target org. And whether they go at customer A or they go to customer B, they're going to use the same set of credentials. Now, for the purpose of this demo, we are making the assumption that they've cleared physical security and they get access to a solution that's on site where they can then access their credentials or register and get into the org. Now, in real life, you'll have validation rules, you'll have restricted IPs, a lot of other mechanisms for them to be able to do that. And we're also making the assumption for the purpose of the demo that they have been pre-qualified to access certain customers. So when they access a hub org and they have those customers show up in the hub org, those are the customers that they already are cleared to work with, okay? So let's look at what the solution is for that. So here you're looking at the solution architecture. Now this builds on top of what Michael spoke about. So the hub and spoke pattern is very visible here. So the contractors are logging into a centralized org, and that's the hub org that you see there in green. And they have access to a number of different subscriber orgs or customer orgs that are set up as connected apps. So they can register, they can log into the hub org, and then automatically can be provisioned or logged into their subscriber orgs. Now, what I'm showing at the bottom of the screen here is the communities template that's based on like an Aloha style launcher. So you have like a single sign-on launcher and you have different customer orgs that you can choose in that org. You select a customer and then you're automatically provisioned and dropped into the customer org where you can then do your assignments of the day, your cases, whatnot. This is a pretty common model. But I'm going to show you this in action with a real-life example. So as part of the demo today, we're going to show you how to use Federation ID and how that's relevant to a user record. We're going to show you that there are connected apps, what the configurations for those need to be and how they need to be set up. We're going to talk about the single sign-on settings and how you can marry that up with connected apps. And then we're going to talk about certificates, as well as just-in-time provisioning and what's the logic behind that. So these are the components that we're going to talk about as part of the demo. So I'm now going to switch over to the demo, and Michael's going to help me with that. So meet Miguel Holtz. He is a contractor in the oil and gas industry, and he has now arrived on site, and he realizes there's no pen and paper, so he's cleared physical security, and he's gone up to the console, and he said, wait a second, I never logged into this org before. I don't know what this is. I have no idea, so I need to register. So he clicks on the registration button at this point. And for the purpose of the demo, we're going to register and log in all in one go. In real life, you would register, some time would pass, they would be qualified to access it, they would come back and they would log in. But we're going to do that all in one go for the purpose of the demo today. Okay, so voila, he's dropped into this hub org that I talked about. This is based on a community template. As you can see on the top right-hand corner, his user record information, profile information there. These are the connected apps that he can access. And today he's working at Prester Drilling. Prester Drilling is an oil and gas company. So he's never worked there before. This is the first time, so he's going to just select it. And he's already been pre-qualified to access it. So he's automatically logged in and provisioned in this org all in one go. So now this user record in the subscriber org that you see on the top right-hand corner is different from the user record or the user profile information that you saw on the hub org. Completely different record. So he can now go about his day, he can enter his cases, he can do whatever he has to do. So Miguel is happy. He didn't realize it was that easy. Very cool stuff, right? So now I'm going to turn Miguel back into an admin. Okay. So let's go and look and see how the magic happens behind the scenes, okay? So we got two orgs set up here. There's a IDP org, which I'm calling GenCom, which is your main hub org, and then you have Prester Drilling, which is your subscriber org, right? So what's the first thing that happens in the entire process? He goes to the console, he registers, he logs in. So let's go look at that user record that was created when he logged in, when he registered the first time. Here you see it's a pretty standard looking user record. It's based on communities. But what you see here on the left-hand side is something called a federation ID. Now this is a random string that's been entered into this user record. This is key for single sign-on. This is very important to understand this. And I'll explain this in more detail. Just know that it's important for single sign-on. And we have generated this string, this federation ID string, using an Apex trigger. You can use Process Builder, you can use a number of different other tools to do that. So let's go and look and see what the Apex trigger is doing. It's pretty short, very few lines of code. All it does is before you create the user, you're entering a federation ID into the user record, and then you're putting it into the database, right? Pretty simple. I will actually share this code with you guys after today's session. So just know that this exists. Now, after he goes ahead, he logs in, he registers, he's presented with a set of different customers that he can access, right? So he has Prester Drilling as one of the connected apps. So let's go look at the connected apps that were set up as part of the process. Here you see a handful of connected apps. He's selected Prester Drilling. So let's look and see how that was set up. Now, there's a lot of different attributes on this connected app that's been set up. All of these attributes are accessible through the API, right? So you can get to any of these attributes. But I want you to note the IDP certificate. So at the top, you will see something called an IDP certificate. So this is saying that the hub org is serving as your identity provider. So you need to set this up, and you will pass this or share this IDP certificate with your subscriber orgs so there's seamless authentication and login during the process. Okay, so moving back to the connected app, and if you scroll all the way down, you notice that there's these things called custom attributes. Now, this is very, very important because what this does is take all his user record information and it passes it through the connected app to the single sign-on settings on the subscriber org. So it pulls his first name, last name, all of that information, and it's sending it through to provision him as a user in the subscriber org. So let's go and look at the single sign-on settings that are married together with this connected app. Okay, so here you see, again, there's the IDP certificate. So we take the IDP certificate from the hub org, we download it, and we can upload it back into the subscriber org, or we can share it with our customers to allow seamless authentication and sign in. Okay, so that's really important. Also, you can see we're using Federation on there, Federation ID. That's what I just talked about. I'll elaborate that on that a little bit more. Scroll down to the bottom, and you see something called just-in-time provisioning. Now, this is what actually creates the user in the subscriber org. So that's really important. Now, this is an Apex class handler. There's a standard handler that comes with the platform. You can use the handler as is, or you can customize it. We have customized it in this case because we want to use profile name and not profile ID, which is standard in the handler. This is based on the SAML just-in-time handler. It's an Apex class that you can actually package and distribute to all your customers. And all that has to happen is the customer admins and the main hub admin, the admin of the hub org, need to work together to make sure all of those settings calibrate and work together seamlessly. So here you can see in the code, there's something called Federation ID. So we're actually creating this Federation ID off the Federation ID that was part of the user record on the main hub org. Taking that Federation ID and using the same Federation ID and creating it into the user record on the subscriber org. That is very important. And because that's what links both of those user records together, and you can actually see that in action. So let's go and see how that user record looks. Let's go back a little bit. Okay, so you have Miguel Holtz here. Check out the Federation ID on this. It's exactly the same Federation ID that was on the main user record that was created on the hub org. And that allows the Federation IDs to be linked to one another in a fashion that the next time he comes back and says, I want to log in, the system checks to say, hey, does he have a Federation ID on that user record? And if he does, he's already been provisioned. Don't provision another record, just go ahead and log him in, right? But if he doesn't exist and that Federation ID does not exist in the subscriber org, it will be created real time during just-in-time handling provisioning. It's a very simple process, pretty cool pattern. Hope that makes sense to you guys. Let's go back now and summarize what we did. So we talked about the Federation ID on the user record and how that's used in IDP. That's the key part of it. We talked about the connected app and how we use we talked about the connected app. We talked about the single sign-on settings that go with the connected app and the IDP certificate that goes along with the connected app as well. And then we talked about just-in-time provisioning and the handler that you would use to make all that work together. So that's a summary of what we did today. So I want to leave you guys now with some code. So we talked about the just-in-time handler. We talked about the Federation ID being created. All of this code is available to you guys. I put this on my GitHub. You just point your phone to the screen. It actually should take you right there if you use the camera. And you can download this code. You can customize it, whatever you feel like you need to do at that point. That's just a little takeaway gift for today. I'm now going to pass it over to Itzik to talk about the second design pattern.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mahesh. So that was a great demonstration of how single sign-on can help you to get better access control to different cloud services. That could be different Salesforce orgs, that could be different communities. You can even use your Salesforce org as an identity provider to deliver single sign-on services and access control to non-Salesforce applications. You also notice in the demo how single sign-on can help you to improve usability around the login process and even improve productivity. Before that, Michael mentioned some of the login discovery challenges. And the fact that even if you implement single sign-on, users still might need to log in, right, when they get redirected to the IDP. And then when they go to the IDP login page, they need to figure out again what username to use, what password to use. So that's some kind of a discovery issue. Another use case that we see quite often is customers that want to enable single sign-on with more than one identity provider. And there are many different reasons for that. For example, in the use case that Mahesh demonstrated, you may want to deploy a community portal for multiple partners, and each partner has its own IDP, right? So you want to allow each partner to log with its own IDP. Now, the way to achieve this today is you configure single sign-on setup for each IDP, for each partner, and then you assign all these IDP options to the login page. This could be my domain login page or community login page. And this is how it looks like, right? You have a list of SSO buttons. We allow you to customize the labels. So now if you're dealing with 2 different IDPs, that's manageable, right? And you can expect end user to go figure out which option they need to choose. But what if you have 5 different partners? Or what if you have 50 different partners, and each one of them has its own IDP, right? So again, that's become a discovery issue. So now I want to show you what we have done for this winter release that will help you to overcome some of these discovery challenges. And for that, I'm going to switch to a demo on this one. Not this one. Yeah, this one. OK, so what you can see here, this is a new default community login page. For those of you that are familiar with the community login page, can you tell what's the difference between this and the standard community login page? No password, right. So one difference, no password. Any other? Let me remove the cursor.
Phone number or name, no email?
Exactly. So basically, one thing that you can notice is that for the first time, user can log in with something that is different from username, right? You can log in with your phone, with your name. We also allow you to log in. We also give you the opportunity to customize the identifier, right? You can allow user to log in with their member ID or with a social security number. You got to pick what identifier. The other thing that you can notice is that there is no password, right? So not only we continue to get rid of password, but we also move into what we call login discovery or interview-based login. And what it means is that we took the traditional login page, right, username and password, and we broke it into 2 steps. On the first step, we give you the opportunity to decide how to identify users. And on the second step, we allow you to determine how you want to challenge users to verify their identity. So, for example, now if I'm going to log in as John, and John is the company accountant manager that is based in London. So I'm going to type my name, log in, and what you can see is that John is now automatically prompted to single sign-on with the IDP that is located in the UK, or maybe with the IDP that is associated with the finance department. If I go back and now try to log in as David is our salesperson in Spain. Hit login, and what you can see now, David is automatically get redirected and prompted to log in with the IDP that is associated with his profile or with his user. Okay? So now what I want to show you is how you can integrate this login discovery capability in your org. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this standard community and going to show you how easy it is to convert it into a login discovery or interview-based login. So here we have a standard community login page. And the fact is that we have different types of user, right? Different types of profile. And we may want each profile to log in different way, right? So for example, for the majority of our employees, right, we want to allow them to log in with our corporate identity provider. In this case, it's one login. But we also have contractors, right? And our HR policy is that contractors should log in only with their LinkedIn account, right? This is how we onboard new contractors. And we also have customers, right? And these customers may not be exposed to highly sensitive information. So we want maybe to allow them to log in without password at all, right? So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to log in as a sysadmin to start configuring this setup. What I'm going to use here, just that you know, is basically a Lightning login. So basically, passwordless login using the Salesforce Authenticator, typing your username, login. Now you can see I get this verification request to my phone. I can tap here, tap to approve, or block to deny if I don't recognize this attempt, approve, fingerprint for additional security, and that's how we log in. This is, again, Lightning login. It's available for all internal users. You can go and enable it right away. So now let's jump to community. And this is our community. So going to workspace, administration, login and registration. And what we're going to do is we're going to select the new discovery login page. Okay. Here we also give you the ability to customize the prompt, right? So in this case, we want to allow users to log in with their phone number. So let's remove the email. This is the login discovery. This is an Apex handler that allows you to customize the discovery logic. I'll talk about this more in details very soon. So let's keep this, save. Let's go back to our login page, refresh. Okay, so you notice how easy it is to get rid of password, right? One click. Now we also want to remove the one login and LinkedIn option, right? So again, let's go here. Let's remove these two options. Refresh. Okay, so we have a passwordless login now, or a login with something that is different from username. Let's add some colors to this page. Where's the?
What do you want that?
The presentation.
Oh.
Okay. So let's use some static resources that we have for the logo and the background. Let's use this one. So we can replace the color, standard color, with the image. We can also do the same thing with the image, with the logo. So take this URL. Okay, so now we have new background, new image. If we go to the login page and refresh, okay, what a great login experience. So now you probably you can realize that just by updating background and label, that won't make the magic, right? So there are at least two more things that we need to do in order to enable this magic. And that's one, we need to create some kind of upfront association between users and the authentication service that they need to should be able to use. There are different ways to do that. What I'm going to use here is basically I created a very simple custom field where I can list all the different authentication services and then assign it to the relevant user. So if I go to the admin, users.
Yeah, let's just close that.
No, I need it.
That was Chromium.
Okay,
You don't. You're there.
sorry.
Okay.
So let's go to users. Okay, so you can notice we have three different users, right? Contractor, employee, customers, right? Different profile. Here I created the authentication service, right? So if I go and edit each one of them, Okay, this is Michael, is the contractor, so we want him to log in with LinkedIn. Myself, I'll be the employee. So let's do SSO. And lastly, Mahesh is our customer, and he should be able to log in without password, so a one-time password over SMS. Okay? So once we have this association, the next thing to do is basically customize the discovery handler. Remember, this is the Apex controller here. So let's select one that I already created up front. It's DF18 discovery. Okay, and let's take a look and see the Apex logic in there. So if you go to Apex, okay, so this is our login discovery handler. Without getting too much into details, basically what it does, it's basically, you can see the login interface here. We basically allow you to pass the input value from the login page, right? The input value that end user type in. And then here you can determine what's the discovery logic, right? How you want to look up users, right? So in this case, you can just get the phone number and try to look up user and figure out what authentication service they need to use. And the second thing is that invoke the relevant authentication service. All our authentication services are exposed via API, right? Single sign-on, username, and password login, so it's very easy to build this customization. As you can see, less than 60 lines of code. Half of this is just handling the phone format, right? So now I think we're ready to test it out. Let's go back to the login page. First, I'm going to log in as Michael, contractor, so let's type. Do you want to try and log in your space? Yeah.
Is this your real phone number?
Yep. And as you can see, Michael automatically gets redirected to his LinkedIn.
It's my real LinkedIn as well.
Using his real LinkedIn credentials, sign in. And as you can see, automatically single sign-on into community. Great. Let's log out now. And Mahesh, do you want to try and log in?
Sure.
So Mahesh is going to use his phone number again, but because he is customer, he's going to get one-time password challenge over SMS. Same login page, same community. Okay.
So I get a verification code.
Yeah.
What's it does?
Yeah, it's 31105.
Mm-hmm.
You don't type in there.
Yeah.
Okay, and again,
Bam.
now Mahesh is logged in. And then lastly, I'm going to log in as a sysadmin internal user. So again, typing my phone number. That's my real phone number. Log in. And you can see now I automatically get redirected to our corporate IDP. That's not our real corporate IDP. Using my real credentials here. And again, I'm logged in into the same community. Okay? Slide. Yeah. So that was the demo. Just a little bit about what we plan to do in the future. So right now we're working for the next release, and this is under the safe harbor statement. Basically, everything that I showed you in the demo is available for external users, right? So you can deploy this user experience.
Go back one.
Yeah, you can deploy this experience to your customer, to your partners over community. What we're working on right now is basically bringing all this capability into my domain. So hopefully in spring release, again, under Safe Harbor, you will be able to deploy such a kind of user experience to your employees or internal users. And with that, we are now opening up the stage for questions. I'm going to leave this deck open, right? So if you have any, here you can find more information, code sample, etc.
Hi, Son here. Okay, great. So when you were changing the user record, were you changing that on the user record in the kind of the community cloud org or the IDP org? Or in your scenario, was that one and the same? In our scenario, we use Salesforce External Identity, and we have our IDP over here, and we have our Sales Cloud and communities over here. So like, you know.
Which demo are you referring to?
You're referring to the discovery.
Yeah, so, exact login discovery, yeah.
So in my case, you notice, I mean, you can do both, right? I mean, you can change it on your Salesforce org, right, the mapping, and you can still use external identity provider, right? So the thing is you need to change it on the user record, and then you need to figure out which IDP. You can also use your Salesforce org as an IDP, right? And then you control everything from there.
So you're changing on the user record associated with the
application? Yeah, I changed it on the user record, but again, you can
Okay.
change it on the profile. So that was just an example, right?
Okay. All right, thank you.
In your demo, how do you handle collisions? Phone number is easy, but name seems a little bit optimistic.
Correct. So right now, you need to figure out how to handle collisions.
Okay.
So for example, phone number, you want to make sure that no more than one user is associated with the same phone number. What we plan to do in the future is we plan to provide you tools to enable you easily to figure out collisions, right? So for example, easily figure out a dedupe, right, on the user object and stuff like that.
Okay.
So in regards to the HubSpoke model, how feasible is that with Salesforce 1?
How
feasible is that with Salesforce 1? Like we saw the flow here on desktop.
Yeah.
That seemed reasonable. Salesforce 1, I haven't seen a lot of documentation regarding that using that model.
Yeah, so Salesforce 1 probably won't render it perfectly like I showed you on the screen. We're going to have a new mobile app coming out for communities, so it's going to be called My Communities. And because that was built on the Communities template, you could potentially render that very well in the My Communities app in the future.
Okay. And then essentially that would open up Salesforce 1 to get into the, okay.
Correct.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to verify, because I was just closing things up, this is available in communities only now.
Correct.
And you're looking at potentially spring 19
Correct.
that we would be able to do this in our standard org.
Exactly.
Correct.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay, that solves one of my questions. Had a two-part question for the HubSpoke model.
Sure.
Oops, sorry. So what happens when a session expires in the HubSpoke? You're always using the community, and in Spring, if you open it up to Hub org, you're always using the Hub org, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way to also optionally go to the Spoke org directly? What happens to these users if they try to log in directly into the Spoke org?
They can, so it depends on kind of the validation rules or any permissions that you have set up around those user records. They should still be able to log in directly to those Spoke orgs using, but the idea is that all of that is masked with a single sign-on, so you're going to actually see the username and password. It's all kind of linked behind the scenes.
Right, right.
So they would have to have that information to be able to log into the Spoke orgs directly.
So the federation can be an optional mechanism. They can still
Yeah, the
have
federation
other
is there
ways
to make it easy, so they don't have to remember all of these different credentials if they were logging in.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily going to be the same password in the Spoke org. It's just linked through the federation ID to do that.
Got it. And I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then I'll probably.
Yeah, that's fine. We can talk offline. Yeah.
Sure. So the login settings were like at the community or the user or the profile setting, but what about from a connected app perspective? can you control, like if you have a more sensitive app that's logging into the IDP, could you change the login flow based on the connected app?
So in the log discovery Apex handler, you should get access to all the org resources, right? So you should be able to query connected app, but I need to better understand the use case, right, to help you figure out what exactly needs to be done. So we can discuss it offline, yeah.
Okay. So if there's any more questions, we'll kind of stand outside the room here, and you guys can come up, and we'll try to help answer some questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.